Last Tuesday against the Bucks, PG had 35, 5 and 5, hit 9 threes.
Yeah, that got him tested.
Just 4 nights after dropping 32 points, Paul George admitted he'd taken an improper medication tied to mental health treatment, and something he said apparently caught the attention of U.S. authorities. It's getting wild. If you didn't know, by January 31st, 2026, the NBA had slapped him with a 25-game suspension, nearly $12 million was gone, and the 76ers were left scrambling. But what really blew people away wasn't just the confession, it was mostly all the questions it opened up about what goes on behind the scenes in the league. The suspension. 4 nights before everything changed, Paul George played what might have been his best game of the season. He scored 32 points against the Bucks. He hit 9 three-pointers. The Sixers won the game. He was 35 years old. He was on a $51.7 million contract, and for the first time in a season full of injuries, he looked like the Paul George that made 9 All-Star teams.
First, the news out of Philly. 4 nights ago, Paul George had what was probably his best game of the season. Scored 32, had 9 threes in a win over the Bucks.
Then on January 31st, the NBA announced it had suspended George for 25 games without pay for violating the NBA-NBPA anti-drug program. The suspension started that same night. The Sixers were scheduled to host the New Orleans Pelicans at the Wells Fargo Center. George would not be in the building.
The NBA suspended him 25 games for violating the league's anti-drug program. We get more on that as we check in with senior NBA insider Shams Charania.
The league did not say what substance was involved. It never does. Under the privacy protocols built into the anti-drug program, the NBA and the NBPA keep that information confidential. All that was made public was the length of the ban and the fact that it was a violation. But George himself filled in the rest. In a statement released through ESPN's Shams Charania, George said the violation happened because he took the wrong medication while seeking treatment for a mental health issue. He didn't name the substance, he didn't name the condition, but he was direct about what happened and why.
This is a highly unusual and stunning development, Ernie, for one of the league's really great players in the past and someone of his caliber.
Charania reported that George told him the test that led to the 25-game ban was the result of an improper medication for a mental health-related issue, not a physical one.
But Paul George told me today in a statement that this occurrence happened for Paul George with this test that led to a 25-game ban due to an improper medication for a mental health related issue, not a physical one.
George's full statement read, "Over the past few years, I've discussed the importance of mental health, and in the course of recently seeking treatment for an issue of my own, I made the mistake of taking an improper medication. I take full responsibility for my actions and apologize to the Sixers organization, my teammates, and the Philly fans for my poor decision-making during this process. I am focused on using this time to make sure that my mind and body are in the best condition to help the team when I return. No excuses. No appeals, no ambiguity about accountability. Under the NBA-NBPA collective bargaining agreement, a 25-game suspension is the standard penalty for a first violation involving certain banned substances. It's not for repeat offenders or dismissal cases. The same 25-game ban was given to John Collins, DeAndre Ayton, and Wilson Chandler in 2019. Each served it and returned. A second offense doubles the suspension. A third results in dismissal. George is on the first step, but even that can alter a season, a contract, and a reputation. The league's anti-drug program, run jointly with the players' union, includes random testing several times a year, education, and confidential treatment for players who seek help before testing positive. But once a test result is confirmed, intent no longer matters. The penalty is automatic. George was born in Palmdale, California. Drafted 10th overall by the Indiana Pacers in 2010, he spent 7 seasons becoming one of the Eastern Conference's top two-way stars, battling LeBron James in multiple playoff series against Miami's Big Three. Traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2017, he teamed up with Russell Westbrook and earned back-to-back All-NBA first-team honors. In 2019, he joined the Los Angeles Clippers alongside Kawhi Leonard in a title push that fell short due to injuries and inconsistency. He signed with the 76ers in 2024, forming a new core with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Over his career, he's made 9 All-Star teams, 6 All-NBA teams, and 4 All-Defensive teams. In 2014, he suffered a devastating leg fracture during a Team USA scrimmage, an injury that could have ended his career. He returned to elite form.
And remember, back in 2020, during the NBA bubble, Paul George was outspoken about mental health that he faced during that time. even in the past few years.
This is not the first time George has spoken about mental health. During the 2020 bubble playoffs in Orlando, he was open about the toll that isolation, pressure, and anxiety took on him. He has been one of the more vocal players in the league about these issues, alongside Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan. That history made the statement land differently than it might have otherwise, but it also raised a question that would dominate the conversation for weeks. If this was really about mental health medication, why was there no exemption? George is eligible to return on March 25th, 2026 against the Chicago Bulls. That leaves him with 10 regular season games before the playoffs. In the 2025-26 season before the suspension, he was averaging 16.0 points per game on 42.4% shooting, 3.7 assists, and 2.4 three-pointers per game at 38.2% from deep. He ranked second on the team in threes made and third in steals with 1.5 per game. He was contributing, then he wasn't.
But he will now be sidelined through March 25th. He's going to be eligible for the last 10 games of the 76ers season.
And the number that followed all of it, the one that made everything feel heavier, came next.
And in total, guys, this is going to cost Paul George almost $12 million.
That number set the stage for what became a much bigger story: the money and the team. The financial fallout from Paul George's suspension was immediate and staggering. His contract for the 2025-26 season totals $51.7 million. Under the NBA's salary proration rules, every game a player misses due to suspension results in a deduction of their per-game salary. For George, that works out to approximately $469,690 per game. Multiply that across 25 games, and the total forfeiture comes to roughly $11.7 million. Money that simply vanishes from his paycheck and does not get redistributed to him in any form. To put it plainly, $11.7 million is more than many NBA players make in a full season, more than the veteran minimum. It's a massive financial hit for a single violation George called unintentional and tied to mental health treatment. The penalty wasn't based on intent or harm. It was simple math: games missed multiplied by per game salary. Context didn't matter. The impact extended beyond George. Under the CBA, only half of a suspended player's lost salary counts toward the luxury tax. For the 76ers, that reduced their projected tax bill by about $5.87 million. Financial relief that came with complicated optics. That savings meant the 76ers suddenly found themselves hovering just a little over $1 million above the luxury tax line instead of being buried under it. And with the trade deadline days away, the timing opened doors that had previously been sealed shut.
Leaving the team a little over $1 million over the threshold and making it easier for the 76ers to dip out of the tax this week without harming the roster.
The cynics noticed this immediately. Some commentators pointed out that the suspension landed at the most convenient possible moment for a franchise that had been publicly wrestling with its luxury tax situation. Joel Embiid had made repeated comments about the need for roster upgrades, all while the front office weighed the financial implications of every move against the tax penalty. Now, with George suspended, that pressure eased considerably, without the team having to trade anyone or sacrifice depth. Speculation grew that the team may have quietly benefited from George's suspension. There was no evidence of orchestration, but the timing raised eyebrows. The Sixers also gained flexibility. After 5 missed games, they qualified for a hardship exception, allowing them to sign a 16th player for short-term depth. On the court, the loss was significant. At the time, Philadelphia was 27-21 and 6th in the East, their strongest position in an injury-plagued, inconsistent season. Losing George for 25 games meant losing one of just 3 players who could consistently create his own shot. It meant giving up a versatile defender averaging 1.5 steals per game and shifting even more offensive pressure onto Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, increasing fatigue risk before the playoffs. Kelly Oubre Jr. could absorb the minutes, but he's a downgrade in shooting, playmaking, and rebounding. George's size, spacing, and defensive range aren't easily replaced, and without him, the team's offensive balance shifts dramatically. It also disrupted morale. After battling injuries and criticism all season, the Sixers had finally found rhythm. Losing a core piece to a policy violation, not injury, brought a different kind of instability. The timing also meant George would miss key matchups, including a home game against his former team, the Los Angeles Clippers, adding a personal dimension to the cost that went beyond dollars and standings. With 10 games remaining after his return date of March 25th, the question wasn't just whether George could get back into game shape in time, it was whether the 76ers would even still be in playoff contention by the time he laced up again. The money was gone, the roster was thinner, and the window for contention was closing with every game he missed. The reactions. The moment Paul George's suspension became public, the reaction was swift, loud, and fractured. There was no single narrative. There was no consensus. What emerged instead was a collision of sympathy, suspicion, mockery, and outright confusion. And it played out across every platform, from studio desks to podcast microphones to social media feeds, buzzing with takes that ranged from compassionate to cutting. The most watched reaction came from inside the TNT studio, where the NBA tip-off crew tackled it live. Shaquille O'Neal did not mince words. His take was rooted in something specific, something institutional. He wasn't guessing. He was speaking from the perspective of someone who had been inside the system and understood exactly how it worked.
But I just want to say that, they give us a booklet on what to do and what not to do. They give us a booklet.
Shaq's point was precise. Every NBA player receives a detailed guide outlining every prohibited substance, every clearance window, and every protocol for getting medication approved.
They also give you inside the booklet how long it takes to get rid of something. So, I don't want to elaborate what he was doing or what he was doing, but, stuff like this should not happen.
That phrase, "stuff like this should not happen," became the prevailing sentiment among those who questioned how a 15-year veteran earning $51 million a year could stumble into a policy violation this elementary. But then, the conversation shifted, because Kenny Smith asked a question that fundamentally reframed everything. If this really was about mental health medication, he argued, the whole premise didn't add up. Why would a legitimate mental health treatment be on a banned list in the first place?
Well, if this is the accuracy of what happened, isn't this an oxymoron, like a contradictory of terms?
That question hung in the air. If you're taking medicine for mental health and the league won't let you take it, then the system is punishing you for seeking treatment.
You're like, you have mental health and you're taking medicine for it that you can't? That would be, to me, that's why I don't understand it.
Smith's logic was straightforward. If the NBA genuinely supports mental health, and it has publicly positioned itself as a league that does, then banning a substance prescribed for mental health treatment is a contradiction. That observation hit a nerve. Charles Barkley took it further. He didn't just question the logic, he openly called the entire situation into question with a single word.
There's something fishy going on here. Now, I don't joke around about mental health, but if you're taking some for mental health, that's got to be an outlier to the NBA.
Barkley's argument was absolute. If the medication was genuinely for mental health, the league should have given George a pass, regardless of what list the substance appeared on.
This doesn't make sense.
Like, there's never a good reason taking performance-enhancing drugs, Shaq. But if you're taking a drug for your mental health, you should get a hall pass.
He compared it to a player having a heart attack and being punished for taking the medication that saved him, a blunt analogy meant to show the league's policy wasn't built with mental health treatment in mind. As one of basketball's most outspoken media voices, Charles Barkley calling the situation fishy on national TV carried real weight. It signaled that doubts about the league's rigid enforcement weren't fringe opinions. That single word suggested the public explanation felt incomplete, and that the rule might be applied strictly simply because it exists, regardless of context. Not everyone was sympathetic. On the It Is What It Is podcast, Michael Irvin took aim at George rather than the league. Referencing his own 1996 drug-related arrest, Irvin sarcastically suggested he could have claimed mental health to avoid consequences. His point, today's players can use that language as protection from accountability. He closed with a thinly veiled, "I hope he gets the help he needs." Elsewhere, former players debated the issue from a different perspective, focused less on optics and more on the realities of managing health in the league.
I believe him when he say this is mental health medicine, because I do believe if I can't do what I want to do because of my body, my mental is messed up.
That perspective reframed everything. It argued that physical decline and mental strain exist on a spectrum. When the body falters, the mind often follows. Whatever George took may have been about restoring more than performance. It may have been about identity. Social media reflected the divide. Some mocked the test result, others praised his transparency, and many questioned why this penalty felt harsher than punishments for other infractions. Each stance carried some logic. The league provides clear guidelines. Mental health exemptions feel morally compelling. Skepticism about accountability reflects broader cultural tension. Former players spoke from experience. There was no clear verdict, only a system many don't fully understand or trust. George served his suspension in silence while the narratives multiplied around him. Mental health, the policy, and the substance nobody will name. The most uncomfortable part of Paul George's suspension wasn't the games or the money, it was the silence. The NBA didn't name the substance. George didn't name a medication. That vacuum fueled speculation. The league's anti-drug policy groups violations into 3 categories: drugs of abuse, performance-enhancing drugs, SPEDs, and marijuana, which has largely been decriminalized under the current CBA. A 25-game first offense typically falls under drugs of abuse or SPEDs. Without disclosure, the public was left guessing. Some believed he may have taken a prescribed psychiatric medication that triggered a positive test, a known issue in pro sports when treatments intersect with banned compounds. If it wasn't cleared through the NBA's therapeutic use exemption process, the violation becomes automatic, intent aside. Former players noted that some substances sit in a gray area, improving mood, energy, and recovery at the same time. For aging athletes, that overlap can make the line between mental health treatment and performance enhancement hard to define. The NBA's policy doesn't weigh motive, it weighs results. If a banned compound appears in a test, the violation stands. Privacy rules prevent the league from naming the substance, protecting players from stigma, but in George's case, that silence cut both ways. Supporters cited his mental health advocacy. Skeptics pointed to the 25-game penalty and the timing after a standout stretch of play. The irony wasn't lost. George's breakout game may have triggered the test. The better he played, the more scrutiny he drew, and the test revealed whatever it revealed. After a season limited to 41 games, the night he looked most like himself set the dominoes falling. Speculation about the substance exploded. Theories ranged from Adderall to Tramadol to recovery drugs, each with different implications. Some substances for depression or anxiety contain banned stimulants. Pain management drugs straddle mental and physical health. Some even argued the 25-game penalty suggested performance enhancement rather than psychiatric care. The debate kept returning to one question: does the system distinguish between getting an edge and getting well? If not, what signal does that send to the next player struggling in silence? George's suspension highlighted systemic issues beyond his case. Ebony magazine noted it exposed policy landmines for athletes seeking mental health care. A 25-game ban and $12 million lost salary create a perverse incentive. Suffering in silence carries no risk. Seeking help can be career-threatening. Advocates call for better therapeutic use exemption, TUE, processes for mental health medications, and confidential support pathways. The TUE exists to pre-approve otherwise banned substances for legitimate medical needs, but it requires advanced documentation and league approval. Take the medication first, apply later, and there's no safety net. But transparency is a personal choice, and George chose privacy. The cost of that choice was a narrative he couldn't control, and a debate that moved far past his individual case into something much bigger. The double standard. If there was one comparison that turned Paul George's suspension from a sports story into a cultural flashpoint, it was this. The NBA has consistently punished drug violations more severely than domestic violence, and once people started putting the numbers side by side, the disparity was impossible to unsee. George received 25 games for taking an improper medication tied to mental health treatment. That is the maximum first offense penalty under the anti-drug program. No appeal was filed, no reduction was granted. The punishment was applied in full, effective immediately. Now consider what happened to Miles Bridges. In June 2022, Charlotte Hornets forward Miles Bridges was arrested on felony domestic violence charges after allegedly assaulting the mother of his children in front of them, leaving her with a concussion, broken nose, and bruises. He pleaded no contest to injuring a child's parent and received probation, counseling, parenting classes, and community service, no jail. The NBA's 30-game suspension was effectively reduced to 10 games because 20 counted for time he'd already missed while unsigned. Bridges returned, kept his roster spot, and continued earning his salary despite later incidents, including a 2023 protective order violation and a 2026 on-court brawl. Paul George, by contrast, got 25 games for a medication mistake. The disparity continued with Kevin Porter Jr. In September 2023, he was arrested for assaulting ex-WNBA player Kizri Gondrezic, causing a fractured neck vertebra and a facial laceration. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor reckless assault, completed an intervention program, and played overseas for the 2023-24 season. When he returned, the NBA issued a 4-game suspension, but it was considered served, meaning 0 games missed. Paul George got 25 games. games. Kevin Porter Jr. got none. Then there was Jackson Hayes. In July 2021, he was arrested after a domestic dispute, pleaded no contest to 2 misdemeanor counts, and received probation, community service, and a domestic violence program. The NBA issued no suspension. He missed 0 games. Paul George got 25 games. Jackson Hayes got none. The pattern goes back further. Darren Collison got 8 games in 2016 for misdemeanor domestic battery. Willie Reed got 6 games in 2017 after charges were dropped. Jared Sullinger got a single-game team suspension in 2013. Jeff Taylor got 24 games in 2014, still one fewer than George received for a drug violation. Drug violations trigger automatic, standardized penalties under the CBA. Domestic violence cases go through legal proceedings, team and league reviews, and variable outcomes based on pleas or dropped charges. The result, punishment for a banned substance is swift and uniform, while punishment for harming another person is slow, uncertain, and inconsistent. Defenders note due process, plea deals, and CBA limits, but the optics are stark, especially for a league that promotes social justice. A 2022 McGill University study of 30 NBA players arrested for domestic violence found only 9 were convicted and only 9 were sanctioned by the league. Most saw little impact on salary or career longevity. By contrast, drug violations receive automatic, rigid penalties. The study concluded that NBA careers survive domestic violence arrests at rates showing structural indifference to violence against women. Not intentional callousness, but systemic invisibility. The comparison is stark. The league punishes a player for taking an unapproved medication more harshly than one who injures a partner. Critics, like Omar Zaran, have called for at least a 1-year minimum ban for domestic violence to set a baseline. Others note that the NBA's 2014 domestic violence policy has been inconsistently applied, with outcomes shaped by legal results, team discretion, and public pressure. That call for the players' union to intervene reflected a growing frustration that the current system doesn't just fail to protect players seeking mental health treatment. It actively punishes them while offering a softer landing to those who cause physical harm to others. And that's where the Paul George story stops being about one player and one suspension. It becomes about what the league values, what it punishes, and what it tolerates. A 9-time All-Star took a substance he shouldn't have taken while trying to manage his mental health, and the system treated him with the full weight of its enforcement power. Other players committed acts of violence against women and walked away with fractions of the same consequence, or no consequence at all. The NBA's response to Paul George was, by its own rules, correct. The 25-game suspension was the prescribed penalty for a first-time violation. The process was followed. The rule was applied, but correct and just are not always the same thing. And the conversation that George's suspension started, about mental health, about policy, about who gets punished and how much, is one that the league has not yet answered. He's eligible to return on March 25th with 10 games left for the Sixers. Whether he can shake off rust, reintegrate, and contribute to a playoff push is uncertain. At 35, after a career of wear and tear, the margin for error is tiny, and he missed 25 games. The substance he took will likely remain unknown. NBA privacy rules protect him, but they also block transparency that might have eased the narrative. The fairness question, however, is clear in the numbers. 25 games for medication, 10 effective games for felony domestic violence, 4 games deemed served for fracturing a woman's vertebra, 0 for a domestic battery conviction. No context or interpretation changes that disparity. Until the league addresses it meaningfully, George's suspension stands as Exhibit A against the NBA's disciplinary priorities. That wraps up this video. For more interesting videos like this, check out the cards on your screen.